Welcome to the Cheating Secrets channel. We hope you enjoy today's story.
What does your family mean to you? Are they just people you surround yourself with for convenience? Do you love them or do you just like them? Are you the type of person who dreams primarily for yourself while others just fill in the gaps? Is your work your top priority while your family is more like a hobby? I've asked too many questions that need answers. Some of you will really have to think about this before expressing your true opinion. Others will answer immediately, but they will know they are lying to themselves. And then there are people like me who will unhesitatingly tell you that my family comes first. My children and grandchildren are everything to me. They are the only reason for my existence. They are my sun, moon, and stars. I would literally give them my last shirt without even asking for their permission. I would give my last dollar to any of them for their frivolous whim. I would gladly live with only the bare necessities so that any of them could enjoy luxury. Now, you may have noticed that my wife is not included in my statement above. 20 years ago, I had a wife. No, she is not dead, at least not physically. We weren't even divorced, as that would have upset my children. We continue to coexist in the same house, in the same conditions we've had for over 40 years. The children know nothing about the rift between my wife and me, and more importantly, she knows nothing either. You might think I'm talking nonsense. I continue to love my family, except for my wife, and pretend that everything is fine. Why would a sane person do that? All three of my children love their mother, and to tell them what is indelibly imprinted in my mind would mean diminishing her in their eyes. I just love them too much to affect their happiness in any way, even at my own expense. Want to call me weak? Well, you can kiss me and call me a coward. It's utter nonsense. What I've been doing for the last 20 years is protecting my children. It's been a feat more difficult than you can imagine, much harder than any form of torture ever invented by man. My name is Charlie, and I have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. They mean everything to me. My oldest, Rob, will soon be 40. Billy is 37, and my little girl, Judy, just turned 33. Thanks to them, I have 8 wonderful grandchildren, and I would gladly give my life for any of them. I have kept this secret inside me for almost 20 years. The woman who was once my life and my only love is Sally. I'm telling you this now because I have only a few days or hours left. The doctor tells me it won't be painful. Sally and I once had what you would call an ideal marriage. We met right after college. I had a great job as a budding architect. Sally was into real estate and she loved what she did. I first saw her in a restaurant, and for me, it was love at first sight. Looking back, I realized it took her a bit longer to say she loved me. I asked her out to a movie. That's how it was done back then. We dated for a few months, and I finally mustered the courage to ask her to marry me. We got married 6 months later in the church her family attended. Hawaii was where we spent our honeymoon and discovered the physical side of our love for each other. We spent a wonderful week in the sun, exploring each other's bodies for hours. Our life as newlyweds was happy. We worked to save money for a house and loved each other deeply. Sally was very good at her job and found us a wonderful home that we could hardly afford. We bought it with difficulty, vowing to work harder and cut down on unnecessary expenses. We stopped eating out and started bringing our lunches to work. I worked harder than ever in my life, and it quickly paid off. Soon I was promoted, and now we could easily afford the house. When we first bought the house, we began spending time together doing things that didn't require spending money, like taking long walks and having picnics. We enjoyed this time so much that we continued to live modestly and spent time together even later, enjoying each other's company. The money we earned was spent on the house, and we worked hard to make it beautiful, a place where we could raise our family and grow old together. The day Sally told me she was expecting our first child, I couldn't have been happier or prouder. All my prayers were answered. Sally's belly grew each day, as did my love for her. We continued living as we had, preferring to spend time rather than money on our children and ourselves. Don't get me wrong, we had everything we needed. We just felt it was more important to do things together as a family than to have all the latest toys for the kids. By doing almost everything as a team, we tried to instill family values in our children. We taught them to distinguish right from wrong in our own way, with love. Church was a big part of our lives, not because we were fanatics, but we wanted the children to believe in a higher power. Attending services every Sunday as a family and participating in all the walks and picnics, our life was happy. At 43, I was injured on a construction site while inspecting a building we were working on. A falling piece of steel beam hit me and my back was crushed. The doctors put me back together, and I spent more than 3 months in the hospital, praying every day to recover and provide for my family. It took a long time to learn to walk and move independently again. The pain was terrible, so I took a lot of painkillers. The pain either subsided or I just started getting used to it. It took some time to wean myself off the painkillers, but eventually I took control of my life. I used a mild form of muscle relaxant for relief. Most of the time I could function normally, so I returned to work. My family life was relatively normal, considering my physical limitations. The only problem was that the medication made me impotent. Sex with my wife had always been, and I really mean always, wonderful and frequent. It was one of the things we discovered early in our marriage that we could do to entertain ourselves for free when experiencing financial difficulties. We loved each other and enjoyed an active sex life until my unfortunate accident. The only positive result of my work injury was the large settlement check we received. My children's education was secured, and I had enough money left for early retirement. The money was, of course, not as important as my health, but over time, it seemed to return. Our life got back on track. I could keep up with work and my family. Everything fell into place, except for sex with my wife. It's been more than a year since we last made love. Imagine, if you will, going from 5 or more times a week to 0. It must have been very hard for Sally, but it was not easy for me either. I was not only pressured by the fact that I was celibate, but the guilt of not being able to please my wife was tearing me apart. Unfortunately, all the doctors told me that as long as I continued taking the medication, my condition wouldn't improve. Well, I said, to hell with it all, and that same day, I threw the pills in the trash. If I had to live with pain to restore what we once had, so be it. I didn't tell Sally about my decision because she would not have agreed. Sally always told me that my health was the most important thing. Based on past experience, it would take some time for the chemicals to fully leave my system. My company sent me to Toronto for a week of meetings about a new building my firm was designing. I left early Sunday morning and planned to be home by the following Saturday afternoon. By Monday, I felt the muscles in my lower back starting to twitch. This was a good sign that the medication's effects were wearing off. Despite the spasms, my meetings went well. I called home every evening to talk to my wife and kids, just as I usually did when traveling for work. These conversations never contained anything new, just the same talks about how school was going and how much we missed each other. Routine things, but I enjoyed hearing all the details of my family's life. On Thursday morning, I woke up with a steel rod. My tool was as ready as ever in my life. My back hurt, but I didn't care. If it meant I was back in the saddle, I would grit my teeth and endure a little pain. My meetings concluded that evening, a day earlier than expected. I was too excited to stay another minute, so I changed my flight reservation and was scheduled to be home the next morning around 11. All the kids would be at school, and Sally and I could spend the day together. On my way home, I thanked God for making me whole again. I took a taxi from the airport. Traffic was light, and I got home around 10:30. My anticipation was at its peak when I entered our house. Well, you can all guess what might have happened, and you'd be right. I experienced the greatest shock of my life when I quietly went upstairs to surprise Sally. Our reverend from our very own church was vigorously comforting one of his parishioners in my bed. Watching the pastor thrust his staff into Sally was the death sentence for our love. There can be no worse feeling than what I experienced at that moment. I wanted to rush in and kill them both. They continued, and I couldn't bear it any longer. I backed out of the bedroom. The shock of seeing my wife of 20 years with her legs up for another man nearly killed me. My first thought was about the children and how they would cope with this knowledge. This thought hit me so hard that I decided to quietly leave the house to have some time to think things through. I booked a hotel room for the night. 2 things immediately came to mind. There was no longer any love for the woman I had married. She killed that feeling in me today, and I lost my faith in God. Just look at what that heartless bastard did to me. To hell with Sally, To hell with God and to hell with his messenger. My mind was in turmoil, but I had to decide which direction to take. If I divorced Sally, the children would find out about their mother's actions. Was that the best solution? No, their happiness means more to me than anything in the world. I couldn't do that to them. I already knew what she had done, so nothing could change that now. It was my burden to bear. No one would share my sorrow. Of course, Sally knew what she had done. Would she feel guilty? Would she confess her infidelity and ask for forgiveness? The emotions within her that led her to break her vows to me would likely prevent her from risking telling me. She knew well how I felt about marital betrayal. Believe me, the next day when I entered my house, I was overwhelmed with a sense of loneliness. I had decided to stay married to a woman whose sight I could no longer bear. It had to be an Oscar-worthy performance. I didn't need to pretend to be tired when I got home. I hadn't slept a wink the previous night. I kissed Sally on the cheek and asked if it would be all right to talk later. I went to my den and closed the door, staying there in solitude until dinner. At dinner, my mood was very subdued. I tried to pay attention to what the kids were saying and answered all their questions about Toronto. That night, I told Sally that while in Toronto, I discovered that I felt much better if I slept in a chair. My recliner was downstairs in my den, so I spent the night there, never intending to sleep in her bed again. The next morning was Sunday, and we all went to church as usual. I hadn't forgotten the other participant in the betrayal that ruined my life and planned to make sure he knew it was over. That day, my family sat in the front pew, although we usually sat somewhere in the middle. I stared intently at the preacher for the entire hour while we listened to his sermon. Sweat was rolling down his smug forehead. He didn't meet my eyes the whole time we were there. I made sure we were the last to leave the chapel that day. I wanted to be the last person to shake his hand. When my turn came, I gripped his hand with an ironclad hold and continued to squeeze as he winced in obvious pain. I leaned in and whispered, "Never come within sight of my family again, or I will nail you to the cross above the altar and burn this damn house of God to the ground." The shock on his face told me he heard my words loud and clear. He knew I meant every word I said. The preacher packed up and left town before the week was over. I resumed taking my medication. My heart was already suffering, so there was no need to endure the back pain as well. Besides, my tool would no longer be necessary. Sally tried a few times to please me, but what I felt for her now brought no benefit. I'm sure she noticed something had changed between us, but perhaps she just attributed it to my guilt over not being able to perform in bed. You might think it would be impossible to live in the same house with someone you no longer loved. I agree with you. It was difficult, but not impossible. If you do it long enough and think about it hard enough, you can find a solution for any situation. Additionally, my medical issues had an advantage. You can use fatigue and pain to resolve many situations. I remembered all the special days like anniversaries and birthdays and always left a little code at the bottom of the card. Sally asked me once after reading her card what those letters meant. I told her it stood for, "Yours forever, Charlie." But I'll tell you what it really meant. You're a dirty liar. In all the years since Sally cheated on me, I never slept in the same room with her. I only returned to church for my children's weddings, telling Sally that the wooden pews were too hard to sit on for long periods. I never told anyone the secret I kept inside for the last 20 years. All of this was done out of the only love I had left, and it was all for my children. Right now, I only have a few minutes left to live. I can feel it. My family is gathered around me. For the most part, I lived a good life. I saw all my children graduate from college and start their own families. They all grew up and are living happy lives. That alone is enough for me to go to my grave a happy man. Once or twice over the years, I thought about getting a divorce. Sally cheated on me. It was a deliberate act of betrayal that I never forgave and never will forgive. During the first 20 years of our life together, I gave her all the love a man should give. For the last 20 years, I was simply the man Sally once married. My body lived in the same house we had worked so hard for, but my mind and heart were somewhere in the past. I never found out if Sally cheated on me more than once. It truly didn't matter. The results would have been the same in any case. My children would have lost respect for one of us if they had learned the truth about what Sally did. They would have hated what their mother did, but likely would have wanted me to give her another chance. As much as I loved them, I would not have given her that chance. The pain and humiliation were too deep. Their wishes would have been rejected, and my family would have fallen apart. I chose the path, right or wrong, to keep the family unit intact and strong. The children's mother and I could be loved and respected equally by them. Saying goodbye to my children for the last time is very hard and sad. I told each of them how much I loved them and how proud I truly was of them. I hugged and kissed them all goodbye and asked them to give me a little time alone with their mother while there was still time. There was much I still needed to say to my so-called wife. Time was running out, and I was growing weaker by the minute. Over the last few weeks, I had made a decision regarding my little secret. "Sally, please come closer. It's becoming very hard for me to speak." She moved her chair closer to the bed. "Don't try to talk, dear. You need to rest." "No, Sally, there is something very important to me that you need to know. For 20 years, you were my wife, my beloved, and my best friend." "Oh, Charlie, you know we've been married for 40 years, not 20. "That's right, and for the first 20 years, you were all that and more to me. But for the last 20 years, you've been just another cheater who cheated on her husband?" I said hoarsely. You knew?" "Yes, I came home early from that business trip to Toronto. I saw you. It's still hard for me to think about that day. Please, Charlie, forgive me. I don't want you to meet your maker this way. Oh, God, I'm so sorry." "To hell with your God," I said as loudly as I could. "Charlie, no, please don't. Don't do this to me. Let me explain. I beg you, Charlie. It was just a moment of weakness. Please forgive me. I beg you." "Sally, I kept this secret locked inside all these years. I never spoke of it to spare the children. Now it's your secret to live with, and I hope you live to a very, very old age. Charlie, please, you have to forgive me before you die. Don't do this to me. If I ever meant anything to you, please, Charlie, please," she whispered through her tears. "Sally, one last thing. Now that I don't have to be nice to you anymore, could you please get the hell out of my sight?" I groaned with my last breath.
Thank you for being with us and listening until the end. If you found it interesting, please subscribe, give us a like, and leave your comments. And we'll see you on the Cheating Secrets channel.